Hello there, time now for Back Pages tonight here on Sky Sports News, bringing you a first look at the sports stories in the morning's newspapers. Joining us are ESPN's Mark Ogden and Martin Ziegler from The Times. Welcome to you both. But before we chat, let's quickly run you through the back pages. And we'll start with the Mirror on a story that dominates many of the back pages as Ange Postecoglou snaps back at his critics. Ange's anger is the headline. He claims he will be a success at Nottingham Forest. To The Sun, and they cover quotes from Ruben Amorim, where he admits only results will actually stop Sir Jim Ratcliffe from sacking him. They also cover Graham Potter's imminent appointment as the Sweden manager and a fresh injury blow for Chelsea and Cole Palmer, now not expected back until the end of November. In the Express, if I get time, I always end up a winner. That's their headline. They also report on Ruben Amorim thanking Sir Jim Ratcliffe for his support and a potential England return for the current traitor star, Joe Marler. More of those stories on the back page of The Star as well. Plus, how Alan Shearer believes Erling Haaland will be the man to break his Premier League goal-scoring record. 260 Premier League goals. That's incredible. In the Eye, they report on the future of Crystal Palace defender Marc Guehi. They say the club is keen to avoid him moving to another Premier League club, and that could mean a transfer abroad, perhaps to Barcelona. And this exclusive in The Telegraph with Steve Borthwick set to leave Owen Farrell out of England's squad for the autumn internationals. We'll come to that a bit later in the programme as well. But Martin, great to see you as always. We have to talk about Ange Postecoglou. It dominates a lot of the back pages. He's had a couple of weeks during this international break, Mark, to think about the fact that Nottingham Forest are winless, the fact that the fans have turned, the fact that the pressure is really just ramping up game after game. But he's come out fighting. He's come out bullish. He's obviously had a look at his stats and his records. And he's been quite forthright in his defence of his record. What did you make of this extraordinary press conference?
Well, that's Ange's style, isn't it? And I guess he's under pressure, and he's under big pressure because the fans have already begun to turn at Forest. So he's come out fighting. And I guess, you know, if Ange isn't going to fight for himself, then nobody else is. So he's basically launched a staunch defence of his record. He's been a success at every club he's been at. You know, the success at Tottenham last season, he won a major trophy, which is a success. The league form last season wasn't a success, which is why he lost his job in the end, finishing, I think, 17th. So, you know, he's right to defend his record, but equally you have to judge him on what he's done at Forest and judge him on his last maybe 10, 12 months in a job in the league. And his league form isn't great over the period of time now. And I think the situation at Forest is that, you know, the fans are very sceptical of his appointment because, you know, Nuno had a certain style. He got them very successful, got them into Europe, had a fallout with the owner. And the owner's basically decided on a whim to appoint Ange Postecoglou. So Ange has got a lot of kind of sceptics to turn around. They didn't want him there in the first place. The form hasn't been great at all. It haven't won a game yet. This whole 007 nickname, you know, no goals, no wins, 7 defeats. It's not looking great for him. So he has to come out fighting because nobody else is going to fight his corner when he's in a situation like he's right now.
I understand him being so defensive over his record, but one of the things that really piqued my interest in this press conference, Martin, was the fact that he said, I just don't fit in. Not here, just in general, he says. If you look at the back page of the Mirror, Ange's anger is obviously the headline. But when you look at actually get to the finer details of what he's saying perhaps he doesn't fit in with the regulation and the way that other managers perhaps fit in this Premier League era. This outsider mentality, do you agree with him? Do you feel like he is an outsider and that's how he's being viewed by the British press?
I think he's always liked to sort of position himself as some kind of sort of maverick. Back in the day at Celtic and when he went to Spurs and then now at Forest, I think that kind of suited him to say, you know, he's not part of the establishment. He brings his own brand, and that's always worked quite well for him. Obviously, you look at the facts. Nottingham Forest spent most of last season trying to hope to get into a Champions League place. That's how well they were doing. And it is completely collapsed, isn't it? And so, you know, no matter what his record has been, no matter that, you know, his trophy record and what he's delivered, you know, the ball facts are there. And I think he did I read something like a 5-minute monologue all about him and, you know, whether he fits in, and he's not part of the normal perhaps manager who might be in the Premier League. But I just think it's as Mark says, no one else is going to defend him. He's going to have to do it himself.
Yeah, he really is. Looking at the back page of the Star headline, Flatline, Ange fears he'll be toast just days after finding an apartment. He says, I've just moved into a new apartment. Maybe that was a bad idea. If he loses in the next match against Chelsea on Saturday afternoon, Mark, could he be gone? Could the house hunt have all been in vain?
Well, it could be gone. I just hope he's renting and hasn't bought the place. But, we'll wait and see, won't we? Listen, I mean, Chelsea's a tough game. We know that. Then he's got Porto in midweek in the Europa League. Then it's Bournemouth, Bournemouth are flying right now. And then there's a kind of irony the week after that, they got Man United at home, which, Ange lost his job after beating Man United in the Europa League final. I mean, who knows what situation Ange and Ruben Amorim will be in by the time we get to that game in just, I think, 2 weeks' time. But, in terms of tomorrow, of course, I mean, Marinakis at Forest is known to be a very impatient owner. We saw that with Nuno. How on earth he could get rid of Nuno after what he brought to Forest last season? Look, the style of football might not be the most attractive to watch, but it was successful for Forest. And the Forest fans love Nuno, and they've got a guy in there now who plays a completely different way of football to Nuno. And he's got this kind of, like you said, this outsider mentality, it's wearing a bit thin now, this Anjac, isn't it? Because he said it last season at Tottenham that he was mocked for his kind of Australian accent, which I don't know anybody that's kind of said, he's Australian, he shouldn't be managing the Premier League. It's just, I think it's Ange's little siege mentality. He's trying to kind of maybe convince himself that he's right for the job. But, the only way he's going to prove himself to be right for the job is to win some football matches. And right now, he hasn't won a single one for Nottingham Forest. And that's why he's under pressure. And that's why, yes, he could go at the weekend if they lose to Chelsea.
Yeah, big game against Chelsea, that one, isn't it? Speaking of big games, Manchester United going to Anfield to take on Liverpool. And Ruben Amorim's on the back page of The Sun here. Smell a rat is the headline. Amorim knows only results will stop Sir Jim from sacking him. This comes after Sir Jim publicly backed him and said a manager like Amorim needs about 3 years to prove that he is the right man for the job. Mark, I know I'm going to come back to you because you cover Manchester United. Ruben Amorim then, under no illusions that his boss might like him, but he still has to deliver results.
Yeah, I think Amorim's realistic. He knows that the results can't continue as they are at United. Look, they look like they're doing a little bit better than last season, but they're not doing well enough. And so far this season they've beaten 2 promoted teams, and the win against Chelsea was against a Chelsea team that was down to 10 men for a good 80 minutes at least. So he has to do better than that. And I think he knows that Sir Jim Ratcliffe coming out saying what he said last week was great copy, it was great headline, and in the moment it was great news for Ruben Amorim. But I do remember last season that 3 weeks before he sacked Eric Ten Hag, Jim Ratcliffe said he was a very good coach. So words don't really matter in football because the results will dictate everything. It's just like what we're saying about Ange Postecoglou. If you don't win enough football matches, no matter who you are, eventually you'll lose your job. And Amorim is in that situation now where they've got a really, really tough game at Anfield at the weekend. United have got a really bad record there in recent years, and they've had some hammerings there as well. So he needs to get a result, and he needs to get a result quickly. And what a better place to turn it around. If you win at Anfield, all of a sudden he's got back-to-back Premier League wins for the first time since he took charge. They'll have won there for the first time since 2016, and they'll have beaten their biggest traditional rivals, and that would be a real kind of springboard to go on to something else. But the flip side is that if they lose there, then they're back to square one in terms of pressure on his job.
Yeah, and that's the thing about Manchester United, isn't it? It's inconsistent. You don't know which Manchester United you're going to get. As for the Liverpool side of things, in the back page of the Mirror, just along that right-hand column there, Slot saying, it's time for my Reds to react. This comes off the back of 3 successive defeats in all competitions for Liverpool. The first time that's ever happened to Slot as a manager. Martin, how does he navigate then this uncharted territory? How does he rally the troops to ensure that 3 successive defeats doesn't turn into 4, 5, 6?
Yeah, I mean, it's in many ways a perfect game for him to end that because, as Mark says, they've got a great recent record against Manchester United there, and yes, he accepts it's been difficult for some of his big new signings. They've spent so much money. Getting them to click hasn't been easy. So all he can do, I think, is go back to the basics that brought him such success last season, concentrate on that, focus on that, but try and explore, why has Mo Salah not hit the heights that he did last season? Why is Florian Wirtz not? I think he said he'd been unlucky. He said, but with more luck, he could have got a load more assists and a couple of goals, but. I think maybe there's a bit more to it than that, and maybe he's trying to protect his new signings from criticism. So I think he needs to try and basically return to the values and what he brought to the club last season, and perhaps not tinker too much with what he hopes to do with the new signings quite yet, and get back to a sort of a level basis.
Yeah, it could be a defining moment for Arne Slot, couldn't it, in his Liverpool career? Just quickly then, gents, I'll start with you, Mark. A prediction of what you think is going to happen on Super Sunday. Liverpool hosting Manchester United. How's it going to go?
I just think Liverpool are going to win. I look at the United midfield and, they haven't really got a functioning midfield because Casemiro's had a busy international break with Brazil. He's come back. Will he be fit? When he is fit and he plays, he's been indifferent this season. Agate, Mainu, they're not ideal in that position. And Bruno Fernandes hasn't got the discipline to play in the two. So I think ultimately it'll be a game that's decided in midfield, and Liverpool's midfield is better than Man United's by some distance.
Martin?
Yeah, I actually think I've kind of got a feeling that Alexander Isak is going to announce his arrival in uncertain terms in this match. I think I've seen flashes, so far, but obviously, he missed the start of the season, and perhaps now we'll be able to see something.
Okay, we're going to hold you both to your predictions and check back in with you when you're next on Back Pages tonight. Okay, we'll leave it there for the moment. Martin, we'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll look at more of the sports stories in the morning's papers, including this in the eye. Barcelona look to snap up Guehi. Could Marc Guehi be leaving Palace to join Barcelona? That's next. Hello again, you're watching Back Pages tonight. Welcome back to ESPN's Mark Ogden and Martin Ziegler from The Times. OK, let's go straight to the back page of The Sun. They're carrying the story about Graham Potter. The Swedes pot shot. Graham Potter close to becoming Sweden's new boss on a short-term deal. Mark, I'd love to know what you make of this, because it feels like a win-win situation for Graham Potter, because perhaps his reputation isn't as high as it once was after that terrible time he had at West Ham, but he's not really expected to help Sweden qualify for this World Cup because of the current situation they're in. But if he does, he'll be hailed as a hero, won't he?
Well, he's got a great reputation in Sweden, having, basically made his name. Östersund's a team that he dragged up from the lower leagues to the top flight maybe 4 or 5, 6, 7 years ago now. And, he's got a place over there, and I think he's been called up because he's got Premier League experience. And you're right, it's a job that it gets him back into management, away from the kind of spotlight of the Premier League, where he's had 2 pretty bad experiences at Chelsea and West Ham. And, Sweden, like you said, that in the group stage right now, they look a lost cause. They've got 2 games left. They're going to have to win both quite substantially to get in the top 2, but they have got a place in the qualify in the playoffs, having secured a Nations League playoff spot for the World Cup. So no matter what, they'll probably be in the playoffs next March, and it gives them a chance to sneak into the World Cup. So, he's got Alexander Isak, he's got Victor Gyökeres, he's got Anthony Elanga. So you've certainly got the firepower to get Sweden, into the World Cup. So he's got a great chance to do it. And like I say, if he doesn't, well, he's back in work, and he's working with a bunch of players that he'll be familiar with, having, known many of them from the Premier League. So it's a good job for Potter. It's a good job for him to just get back into the game and like I said, just kind of rebuild his reputation away from the spotlight of the Premier League in a less intense environment.
Yeah, in a country that he knows so well as well. OK, let's get to the back of the eye. Talk about this. This is an interesting story. Marc Guehi, who was one of the names of the summer transfer window, thought he was going from Palace to Liverpool. That didn't happen on deadline day. The headline here, Barcelona look to snap up Guehi. This is incredible, Martin. Could this happen? Because we know he's into the final year of his contract. So for all intents and purposes, he could sign a pre-contract in January.
Yeah, he could. I think Crystal Palace would prefer perhaps to earn a bit of cash, maybe if it was going to be a big transfer fee and sell him in January. But otherwise, they're going to lose him for nothing. Liverpool very interested in him, weren't they? In the summer, I think were sort of disappointed not to get him. I think Barcelona, I mean, they have got their spending limits. They've had a sort of financial crisis. They've not been able to spend nearly as much as they've hoped to. They've got people like Marcus Rashford in for little or no money, and so I think the Guehi, if he's going to go on a free transfer, that might be the perfect move for him. If they can give him a big salary, obviously a very glamorous club. Maybe that might tempt him to look there instead of going to Liverpool. But I mean, he's also, I think he has previously expressed an interest in playing abroad, so it could be the perfect fit.
Yeah, a massive club for him to join, wouldn't it? And an interesting opportunity for him. But how much of a missed opportunity is it, Mark, for Liverpool? The fact that if they don't get him and he goes elsewhere, they look like they had him tied down, and he's such an exceptional talent. They might have missed that altogether now.
Yeah, that was always the danger by not getting it done. I think that's why they tried to rush it through on deadline day, because they knew that once he gets into that final year of his contract and, potentially a free agent next summer, there's going to be so many more clubs that are interested. Real Madrid have been mentioned as well, Bayern Munich, other clubs in the Premier League. And I think that what I've heard is Marc Guehi wants to run down his contract and see out the season at Palace and then leave as a free agent. But I guess if Barcelona are making you an offer in January, there are certain clubs in the world that you have to kind of consider at any opportunity. Barcelona is one of them. The Spanish champions, they've got a good chance of winning the Champions League. You can play with Lamine Yamal. That might make him reconsider a decision to go at the end of the season and just say, look, in January it'll be a knockdown fee because he's got 6 months on his contract. That'd be a very hard move to turn down for anybody, never mind Marc Guehi.
Yeah. Back page of the Star then. We're talking Erling Haaland now. How good for how? Alan Shearer has backed Erling Haaland to replace him as the greatest Premier League striker of all time and beat his 260 Premier League goals. That would be absolutely phenomenal, wouldn't it? Martin, Haaland currently on 94 league goals in just 104 appearances, but you wouldn't bet against him.
No, I mean, I think if Haaland was English, you would definitely wouldn't have bet against him, because you think he'd play his whole career in the Premier League. I suppose the bigger question is, does Haaland want to try playing in Real Madrid, Spain, for example? And if he did that, then obviously it would be much more difficult for him to break that record. But clearly, given his age and his scoring record and how quickly he's like hitting the goals in this season again, if he stays in English football, you'd think he's bound to do it.
Yeah, for Haaland, Mark, in great goal-scoring form, so an important asset for Manchester City. Does he help ensure that they are still title contenders, even though at the time of speaking they're 3 points off top-place Arsenal?
Oh yeah, if Haaland's fit, the title contenders. If he's not fit, they're not title contenders. I think he's that important to Man City, and that's why they gave him a 10-year contract in January. That they wanted to be their guy for the next decade. But in terms of beating Shearer's record, it's still a tall order. Even if he gets 25 goals a season for the next 6 seasons, he still hasn't broken it. That's how hard it is going to be to break Alan Shearer's record. He's still not even halfway there. And I think 260 goals is an immense number, considering that Alan Shearer had a couple of really bad injuries. And I think I just made a note as well. He scored 23 First Division goals for Southampton just before the Premier League started. So if you want to talk about his top flight goals, Shearer's got 283. But obviously the Premier League goals is 260. So it kind of shows the standard that he set. And I do think that Haaland he's probably the best chance of doing it any player in the Premier League right now. But I don't think he'll do it. I just think it's too high a barrier to clear. And I think, like Martin says, he might want to try his luck somewhere else in the years to come. So I think at the rate he has to score the goals, to be that consistent, 25 goals a season for the next 6 years, that's really, really high bar. And I think he falls short.
Yeah, it just goes to show how phenomenal Alan Shearer was. And speaking of, great players that kind of bolster a team's chances in the league, Cole Palmer, on the back of the Sun here, Cole, KO, hits Enzo. We're now expecting Cole Palmer to be out until at least the end of November, Martin. How much does this dent Chelsea's chances of finishing high up in the league?
Well, massively, isn't it? I mean, he's their key player. He's their sort of star player as well. He's the player all the sort of kids look up to. So it's not just on the pitch as well. I think not having him in the team, they lose a bit of their star quality too. But yes, we don't have to say how good he is and how creative he is. And actually, when he went through his sort of dry patch when he wasn't scoring goals last season, Chelsea really struggled, didn't they? And so I think he couldn't be a bigger loss really for that team.
Big loss for Chelsea, but a big personal loss for him, considering there's a World Cup on the horizon, Mark. I mean, if he's not fit enough in time, how much does this dent his chances of actually making the squad with so much competition for places in that midfield?
Yeah, it's a tough one, this, because Palmer played in the Club World Cup in the summer, and I think he played to mid-July, and there was this kind of fear amongst a lot of the people in the game that the players that played in the Club World Cup would suffer injuries as the season progressed, and all of a sudden there's quite a few, there's Cole Palmer, Trent Alexander-Arnold, he's one Desiree Doué, PSG, Ousmane Dembele. So lots of the players that played a lot of games in the summer is catching up with them now. So yes, Palmer's been set back, but it might work in his favour for the World Cup. It might give him the rest that he needs. And obviously players that are injured don't have the full rest, but it means he's not playing 2-3 games a week. So maybe there might be a bit of a silver lining of this for Cole Palmer, that he's getting the rest now. He's not playing the games, and by the time the World Cup comes on, he might have had 6 months of football behind him rather than the 18 months that it looked like, considering the season he had last year.
All right, let's just change tact a little bit, change sports even, and speak rugby now. Back at the Telegraph, Borthwick set to leave out Farrell. Owen Farrell not expected to play any part in England's autumn internationals, but in this exclusive by Gavin Mayers, he says the door will remain open for a possible return to the team before the 2027 World Cup in Australia. Martin, how shocked are you by this, considering the start to the season that Farrell's had at Saracens?
Yeah, he's been playing well, playing it inside centre for Saracens. Come back from France. I think England, Steve Borthwick can't say that he's not going to be considered, because he's back in the English game, so he has to be eligible now. And to say he's not going to, even though he's 34, that he's out of the picture, I don't think you can say that. But Borthwick, I think, is very much looking forward. He's planning already for the next World Cup in a couple of years' time. And I think picking Farrell would be a bit of a backward step, and I think he probably feels that as well. He wants to look at other options. Sam Atkinson is injured. He's been his sort of favoured player in that position so far. But Ollie Lawrence from Bath, he's played there quite a few times for Borthwick, and I think he will want to see what he can do if his first choice isn't there. And, Farrell is going to be 36 by the time the next World Cup happens. And although he was called up late for the Lions, wasn't he, by his dad? But I think he probably thinks it's, we need to focus on the future, not the past.
Yeah, and Farrell, of course, not being a part of international rugby since 2023. So speaking of comebacks, on the back of the Express, Joe Marler, could he make a comeback? Joe eyes a comeback, they say in the headline there, top right of your screen. Joe Marler could be poised to make an England comeback at the age of 35. Now, Mark, I love this because we all know him now because he's on Celebrity Traitors. Could this be the avenue that allows him to relaunch his sports career? Incredible.
Yeah, I mean, as Martin said about Farrell, Farrell's younger than Joe Marler, so I think the fact that Joe Marler may want to come back at the possible age of 37 at the World Cup, I just think that's too much of an ask. And I think, a great story as it'd be, he's been retired for a year now, well, last November, so again, I think you've got to look to the future. I think, great past, but you've got to look to the future for the next World Cup. So I'm not sure this is one that works.
OK, fair enough. Mark Ogden, Martin Ziegler, thank you very much for your company as always. If you missed any of the show, there's another chance to see Back Pages tonight at hour. And the show is also available as a podcast. Just download Back Pages on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Coming next on Sky Sports News, more build up to the big one at Anfield.